I've made a career out of being a ghost. That's the simplest way to describe professional house sitting at this level. I don't stay in suburban split levels while families go to Disney World. I stay in glass and steel fortresses in the hills, or sprawling estates with heated driveways. My job is to make sure the pipes don't freeze, the humidity stays at 40% for the oil paintings, and, most importantly, that the house looks lived in to any prying eyes. Rich people have a lot of enemies, and a dark house is an invitation. So, I'm the light. I move from room to room. I use the gym. I cook expensive steaks on Viking ranges. I live a billionaire's life on a middle-class salary, provided I follow the rules. And every owner has rules. Don't touch the wine cellar. Don't let the cat out. The third floor balcony is structurally unsound. I never care. I'm a pro. I follow the list, I take my check, and I move to the next mansion. But the Thorne Estate was different from the minute that I pulled up on the 3-mile gravel driveway. The house was a monstrosity of Victorian architecture and modern glass. It sat on a cliffside, overlooking a great churning lake. It looked like a museum for things that were dead. The owner, a hedge fund manager named Julian Thorne, didn't meet me in person. He left a leather-bound folder on the kitchen island. No digital codes, no emails, just paper. The rules were standard, until I got to the last page. Rule 7. The basement door is to remain locked at all times. Do not check the seal. Do not listen at the door. And Rule 8. There's a baby monitor on the nightstand in the master suite. It is hardwired into the nursery on the 4th floor. Do not move it. Do not turn it off. Under no circumstances are you to enter the nursery. Julian didn't have any children. I'd done my research. He was a widower, his wife having passed away in a car accident 5 years ago. There was no baby. Rich people and their grief, I muttered, pouring myself a glass of expensive filtered water. I figured the nursery was a shrine, a room frozen in time that he couldn't bear to look at, but couldn't bear to let go of. I'd seen it before. The first 3 nights were easy. The house was silent, save for some wind whistling through the cliffside pines. I spent my time in the library, reading first editions and enjoying the silence. I stayed away from the basement, and I stayed away from the 4th floor. But the monitor, that was the problem. It was an old-school model, none of that high-def digital stuff. It was a grainy black and white screen with a constant hiss of white noise. It sat on my nightstand like a heavy square eye. For the first 2 nights, the screen showed nothing but a dark room with a crib in the corner. Empty. Static. On the 4th night, the temperature dropped. A storm was rolling in off the lake, shaking the heavy glass panes of the master bedroom. I was drifting off to sleep, the white noise of the monitor acting like a lullaby. Creak. I opened my eyes. The sound hadn't come from my room. It had come from the monitor. I sat up, my heart doing a slow, heavy thud against my ribs. I looked at the small glowing screen. The nursery was no longer empty. There was a rocking chair in the corner of the room, just at the edge of the camera's frame. It was moving, slowly, back and forth, creak, creak. And then a woman sat down in it. She wasn't a ghost. She didn't glow. She looked as real as I did. She was wearing a simple dark dress, her hair curled back in a neat bun. She didn't look at the crib. She leaned forward, her face coming into the center of the grainy frame. She looked directly into the camera. It felt like she was looking through the screen, through the 3 floors of the house, and directly into my eyes. "He's in the master suite tonight," she said. Her voice was low, melodic, and perfectly clear through the static. "He's sitting up now," she continued. "He's wearing the gray t-shirt. He's wondering if he should call the police. He's wondering if I'm a recording." I froze. I was wearing a gray t-shirt. I reached for the monitor, my hands shaking. I wanted to turn it off. I wanted to find the power button and kill the light. "Don't do that, Julian," she said. My hand stopped. "My name isn't Julian. My name is David." Julian was the owner. "Julian always tries to turn me off when he gets scared," she whispered, a small cold smile touching her lips. "But you aren't Julian, are you? You're the new one." the sitter. I found my voice, though it sounded thin and weak. "Who are you?" "I'm the one who stayed," she said. "The one who followed the rules until I didn't. Did he tell you about the basement? Did he tell you that the stairs down there don't lead to a cellar, but to a hallway? And that hallway leads to a room exactly like the one you're sitting in?" I backed away from the nightstand, my pulse racing. I looked at the bedroom door. I had locked it. I always locked it. "He's looking at the door now," the woman on the monitor said. "He thinks the lock will keep me out. He doesn't realize that I'm not the one he needs to worry about. I'm just the one who watches." Suddenly, the monitor's audio spiked. A loud rhythmic thumping started. It wasn't coming from the 4th floor. It was coming from directly beneath my bed. Thump, thump, thump. Someone was in the floorboards, or the crawl space. Someone was mimicking the heartbeat of the house. "Rule 7, David," the woman said, her eyes wide and unblinking on the screen. "You didn't check the seal on the basement door." But he did. "And he's coming up the laundry chute now." I bolted. I didn't grab my shoes. I didn't grab my phone. I ran for the bedroom door, yanked it open, and sprinted into the long, dark hallway of the 3rd floor. The house felt different now. The luxury was gone. It felt like a rib cage, and I was something small being swallowed alive. I reached the top of the grand staircase. I looked down into the foyer. The basement door, the one that was supposed to stay locked, was standing wide open. A trail of wet, dark footprints led from the basement, across the white marble floor, and straight towards the stairs. Toward me. I looked back at the master bedroom. The monitor was still hissing. I could hear her voice drifting down the hall. "Run, David. It's the only part of the job he actually pays for." I didn't go down the stairs. The wet footprints on the marble foyer were still glistening under the moonlight. Whoever had come out of that basement was already on the ground floor, waiting in the shadows. I turned and ran the other way, toward the back service stairs. My bare feet made a slapping sound on the cold hardwood that felt like a death sentence in the silence. I reached the narrow door of the service staircase and slipped inside, pressing my back against the wall. My breathing was ragged. I reached into my pocket and realized with a jolt of ice in my veins that I'd left my phone on the nightstand. I was in a $20 million fortress with nowhere to call for help, and a woman on a monitor who knew my every move. Creak. The sound came from the hallway I'd just left. Then, a voice. It wasn't the woman. It was a man's voice, deep, gravelly, and sounding like it hadn't been used in years. "David?" I froze. He knew my name too. "Julian said you were coming," the voice whispered. It sounded like it was right on the other side of the service door. "He said the house was getting lonely. He said you were a pro, that you wouldn't ask questions." I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. "I'm hungry, David. Julian hasn't been down to the basement in 3 days. He forgot about the seal. He forgot about the silent partner." I realized then that the rules were not just for me. They were instructions for a feeding schedule. Julian Thorne hadn't hired a housekeeper to protect his property. He had hired a distraction, or worse, a replacement. I looked up. The service stairs led 2 ways, down to the kitchen or up to the 4th floor, the nursery. The woman on the monitor had seemed like a threat, but she was the only one talking to me. The thing on the other side of the door sounded like a predator. I took the stairs 2 at a time, heading up. If I could get to the nursery, maybe I could find whatever transmitter she was using. Maybe there was a way out of the attic. I burst through the 4th floor landing. The air here was different. It didn't smell like lemon polish and expensive candles. It smelled like mothballs and old stagnant water. The nursery door was painted a pale, peeling blue. It was the only door on this level. I pushed it open. The room was exactly as it had appeared on the grainy monitor, but seeing it in person was worse. The rocking chair was still moving, swaying in the draft from a cracked window. But the chair was empty. I looked at the nightstand in the corner of the nursery. There was a second monitor there, the twin to the one in the master suite. It was pointed directly at the crib. I walked over to the crib, my heart hammering. I expected to see a doll, or maybe nothing at all. Instead, the crib was filled with notebooks, hundreds of them. I picked one up. The cover read, Sitter number 14, Observations. I flipped it open. It was a handwritten log in Julian Thorne's elegant cursive script. Day 1. Subject is compliant. He likes the library. He doesn't suspect the basement. Day 4. Subject is starting to hear the thumping. The partner is getting restless. I'll have to move the monitor tonight. Day 7. Transition complete. The partner is fed. Hiring sitter number 15 tomorrow. My skin crawled. I wasn't the first ghost in this house. I was the 15th. I told you not to come up here, David. I spun around. The woman from the monitor was standing in a doorway. In the dim light of the nursery, she looked even more real and more terrifying. She wasn't a ghost. She was thin, her skin pale as parchment, and her eyes were sunken into her skull. She held a heavy brass key in her hand. Julian Thorne doesn't have a wife, I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. He has a collection. I was sitter number 9, she said, her voice trembling. I found the notebooks too. I tried to run, but the partner, he's faster than he sounds. He likes to hunt. Julian watches us on the monitors like a movie. It's his only hobby. We have to get out of here, I said, reaching for her hand. The basement door is open. He's out. She looked at me with a pity that made my stomach turn. The basement door isn't the exit, David, she whispered. It's the entrance to the guest suite. And you're wrong about one thing. She pointed to the monitor in the nursery nightstand. The scene was flickering. It was showing the foyer. I saw Julian Thorne. He was sitting in a chair in the dark foyer, wearing a headset, a glass of scotch in his hand. He was watching a bank of screens. He looked bored, like a man watching a rerun of a show he'd seen too many times. And behind him, stepping out of the shadows of the open basement, was a massive, hunched figure covered in gray rags. The partner. The creature didn't attack Julian. It leaned over and whispered something in his ear. Julian nodded, pointing at the ceiling, directly toward us, and took a sip of his drink. Julian isn't the one in charge, the woman said, stepping back into the hallway and closing the nursery door. He's just the one who pays the bills. The partner is the one who chooses who stays. The lock clicked from the outside. Rule 8, David, her voice came through the wood. You entered the nursery. Now you're part of the archives. Below me, I heard the heavy, wet thumping start again. It wasn't in the floorboards anymore. It was on the stairs. The nursery door didn't just lock. It sealed. I could hear the heavy thud of a deadbolt that sounded like it belonged on a bank vault. I was trapped in a room full of journals, a rocking chair that wouldn't stop swaying, and the smell of old dust. The thumping on the stairs stopped right outside the door. I didn't scream. I didn't bang on the wood. I knew instinctively that noise was just seasoning to whatever was waiting on the other side. I stood in the center of the room, my eyes darting to the only other feature in the nursery, the window. It was a small reinforced pane overlooking the cliff. Below it, the lake roared. It was an 80-foot drop into jagged rocks and freezing water. It wasn't an exit. It was a choice. The monitor on the nightstand flickered. Julian Thorne was still on screen, but he had stood up. He walked toward the camera until his face filled the frame. He looked tired, not like a villain, but like a man who was exhausted by a chore he couldn't stop performing. I'm sorry, David, Julian's voice came through the monitor speaker. I really liked your resume. You were the most quiet sitter we've had in years. But Rule 8 is the only one that truly matters. Once you see the notebooks, the guest won't let you leave. He's very sensitive about his privacy. Julian, open the door, I shouted, finally breaking the silence. Whatever this is, whatever you're doing, you can stop it. I can't, Julian whispered. The partner was here when I bought the house. He's the reason the house was so cheap. He's the reason I'm still alive. He's a collector of stories. And you, David, have a very interesting story. The nursery door groaned. The wood began to bow inward, not from a shoulder hit, but from a slow, immense pressure. I looked at the notebooks. Sitter number 14. My life, my habits, my favorite books, all of that was being documented for the amusement of a thing that lived in the dark. Was my fate going to be the same as number 14? I realized then that the woman in the hallway, the one who locked the door, wasn't my enemy. She was just the latest librarian. She was showing me my place in the collection. The door splintered. A massive gray hand, long-fingered and tipped with blunt, yellow nails, reached through the gap and gripped the frame. It didn't belong to a man. It was too large, the skin looking more like damp stone than flesh. I didn't wait for it to open the door. I grabbed the nightstand and shoved it against the entrance, but it was like trying to stop a landslide with a toothpick. I turned to the window. I grabbed a heavy wooden block from the floor, a child's toy from a child that never existed, and smashed the glass. The cold lake air rushed in, smelling of salt and wet earth. David, don't. The woman's voice came from the hallway, muffled by the door. The water is worse. The water is where the ones who checked out early go. He'll just find you at the shore. He always finds them at the shore. The door flew off its hinges. The figure that stepped in was a nightmare of anatomy. It was nearly 7 feet tall, hunched so low its knuckles grazed the floor. It had no eyes, just a smooth, pale expanse of skin where a face should be, and a mouth that was nothing more than a jagged horizontal line. It didn't smell like a monster. It smelled like the library downstairs. It smelled like old paper. It didn't attack. It just stood there, tilting its head as if listening to my heartbeat. Then, it reached out and picked up one of the notebooks. My notebook. It began to flip through the pages with a strange, delicate grace. It wants to know how it ends, Julian's voice crackled through the monitor. He's read your beginning. He's read your middle. But the ending is up to you. The creature held the notebook in front of me. It produced a pen from the folds of its gray rags, a fountain pen I recognized from Julian's desk. It wanted me to write the end. I looked at the creature. I looked at the window. And then I looked at the monitor. I saw Julian Thorne smile. It was a small, knowing smile. And that's when I saw it. Behind Julian, on the wall of his control room, was a photo. It was an old black and white picture of two men standing in front of the house. One was Julian's father, the other was the creature. They were shaking hands. This wasn't a haunting. It wasn't a kidnapping. It was a business. The Thorne family provided the narratives, and the partner provided the wealth. The sitters weren't food. We were content. I took the pen. My hand was shaking, but as I touched the nib to the paper, a strange calm washed over me. I realized I couldn't run. The gravel driveway, the 3-mile road, they were just parts of the set. I thought for a moment, and then I wrote a single sentence in the notebook. The creature leaned in, reading the words with its sensitive skin. It let out a low, vibrating hum of approval. It stepped aside, gesturing toward a rocking chair. I sat down. The woman who had locked me in stepped into the room. She wasn't afraid anymore. She looked at me with a weary sort of welcome. She picked up a second pen and a new blank notebook. Sitter number 16 will be here on Monday, she said softly. He's a younger man, a runner. He'll be fun to watch. I started to rock. Creak, creak. I looked into the lens of the baby monitor. I knew Julian was watching. I knew he was recording. I hope you like the ending, Julian, I whispered. The screen on my nightstand went black.